talking to you about potential and coaching potential especially, because I often come from a more kind of stood back or academic position for looking at personality. So I'm really interested to ask you about some of the specifics kind of hands-on coaching. But first, can you tell me a bit about you and what your company does?
Yeah, Leadenhall Consulting, we founded 7 years ago. I'm the managing director. We're a firm of about 20 associates. We focus on coaching, team coaching and leadership development. And so we use psychometrics in our day job very frequently, and we see it as a very practical tool to help us with development. And interestingly enough, I see it less on the selection side and much more about how can I help people understand themselves better and help them get some insight into their personalities.
Yeah, so I really wanted to ask you about that specific value in what you get and what the clients get during coaching. So what do they see in themselves? How do you explain personality tests to them or other assessments?
Yeah, many people have never come across psychometrics, and their first reaction, I think many people's natural reaction is, oh my God, I'm going to hold up some information that I don't want the other person to find out about. They're nervous. Now, we're not psychologists. But what we do is say to them, look, here is some information. It's not you. You are the personality. You're a very complex being. But this psychometric will give you some data about how you compare to other people. What we don't do is imply that we know more about them than they know themselves. But we use the instrument as a way of having a conversation. And of course, we often meet people for the first time. They're strangers. And if somebody's a stranger, how much are they going to divulge to you on that first meeting? And one of the things we find about psychometrics, whether it be HPTI or Hogan, is we start by exploring feedback to them, and they open up and they learn things. And suddenly we go from meeting a person for the first time to having very deep conversations about their motivation, how they view themselves, maybe even some of their background. So we find psychometrics very valuable in this process.
Yeah, and I find sometimes it's surprising how quickly and how much people open up. Partly because no one's ever asked them the question before. So what kind of questions do you ask that kind of help people open up, get that process to have some kind of value and interest to them?
Well, funnily enough, it depends on whether we're coaching or using psychometrics. If we're using psychometrics, we sit alongside and say, look, we've got some information. Let's go through the information and let's talk about it. And so you have almost a third party in the room, some evidence and some data, which isn't my opinion, it's stuff that you've completed. So in the case of HPTO, we might be looking at their conscientiousness score, or we might be looking at their ambiguity score and their ability to tolerate ambiguity. And what we do is first of all, we ask them if that sounds as though it's appropriate to them, the score that they've achieved, what implications that might have had for them, and we begin an exploration. So suddenly we're having conversations about their style, how they work, how they perceive things. It could be risk, for example. What's their perception of risk? Are they highly conservative? Are they risk-taking? How's that worked in their career? Suddenly you're having a very rich conversation out of the instrument. So I see it as a third party in the room. It's quite an interesting device. It's almost like a theatrical device that enables you to have a conversation that you would not have naturally when you just met somebody for the first time.
Yeah, and it's nice to open it up and get that common language too, right? Do you find people are ever surprised by the results?
Rarely.
Yeah.
I think what I am concerned about, and if you think of things that clearly have no correlation, like let's say astrology, there is a tendency to want to believe what you read is who you are. So I'm a Sagittarian, and I read that Sagittarians are trustworthy. Yeah, of course I'm trustworthy. So one of the things I actually often say when I introduce it to people is, I don't want you to just read this and make that kind of judgment. And I use astrology as an example. I say, look, I want you to tell me if this doesn't ring true. Because actually I'm interested in how you perceive yourself and what the truth might be. This is just some data. So I take the view, not that I'm there to tell them that the data is true and that they're wrong. I start by saying, you know yourself, but here's some interesting data.